when you don't have those aspects written down, family feels one way. No, they would want this. No, they would want that. It creates a lot of stress and emotional discord on an already very trying and overwhelming time. So I tell my clients that yes, you're doing this so your wishes are followed and everything happens according to what you want, but you're also doing this to relieve a lot of stress and anxiety from your family members.
What will you do when your money works for you? Welcome to the Tech Girl Financial Podcast with your hosts, Victor and Kim Gaxiola. From the home office in California, here is Victor and Kim.
So today we're really excited to conclude our financial professional series by inviting a good friend of ours and someone that we work very closely with. That is Barbara Pretlove of Pretlove Law, who is going to talk to us about estate planning, wills, trusts, and all the important things that you need to consider, especially as you're getting a little bit older and you want to make sure that your wishes get carried out after you pass away. So thank you and welcome.
Thanks for having me, Victor. Glad to be here.
Yes, glad you're here as well.
So why don't we start with a little bit of background? So what is it that brought you into this profession?
So for as long as I can remember, I always wanted to be an attorney. I did segue for a while in college. I went into film and television, did that for about a year in Los Angeles, producing my own commercials and music videos. I found myself gravitating much more towards the legal aspect of it. And I just decided the scheduling and the demands of being in Los Angeles in that world were way too much for me. And if I ever wanted to start a family or have kids, I did not want that lifestyle. So spending that much time in the legal area of that just really pushed me back into law school. So I returned to that in San Diego, California Western School of Law. And I actually went back originally looking at either entertainment law or environmental law. Didn't really find a connection with either one. I really wanted to do what I felt was much more personalized help. And so I got an internship here in Morgan Hill with a law firm that did estate planning. And I absolutely fell in love. I found a big human connection. I thought I was doing a lot of help on a very individualized level. And I just never looked back and started growing my practice from there.
Wow. It's interesting to go from the glamorous world of entertainment to the glamorous world of being an attorney,
Right.
law, right?
Yes.
But it sounds like you found like a real connection with it. And so what is it about the work that you really enjoy?
I find that I really get to know individuals on a personal level. I don't like to have clients come in, do their estate plan, push them out the door and turn things over. I see them from beginning to end, all stages of life. I see their kids grow up and eventually help them with the trust administration. And I feel like I'm more of a family figure in their planning, that I can really stick with them through a lot of different changes in their life. And I just find that so much more satisfying than any other aspect of law that I could have gone into.
That's so neat, because I think sometimes when I look at the estate planning and creating the trust and the documents and what have you, I just think of it as a transaction right there. But the fact that you view it like we view it in that relationship over time is, I completely understand that.
Oh, absolutely. And I've been doing it for almost 7 years now. And I see young couples come in where they're just starting a family. I see, older couples come in with aging parents, and 3 or 4 years down the road, they come back and see me, and their lives have just changed so drastically. Either now they need medical assistance for their parents, or one of them passed away, or their spouse unfortunately passed away, or their kids are going off to college and they need powers of attorney and medical directives for them.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to be able to grow with the clients I have.
And I love that you just said that, do you see married couples when they're just getting married come in to see you? So for some of our younger listeners out there, if there's anything that you can give them as advice, why would they even think about this when they're in the beginning of their life together?
Absolutely. And there are a handful of triggering events, marriage being one of them. You're combining your assets. Typically, there are many planning techniques where you wouldn't need a trust that early on, but you end up traveling a lot together. You have kids together. Part of the estate plan is appointing guardians for your children should something happen to you and your spouse. If you're on vacation and you both something happens, you're incapacitated, not just that you pass away, but there could be an accident where you're both in a coma. If you don't have these documents in place, it's a lot longer and more expensive legal process to go through to take care of you in those instances. So even though you're young and you're not thinking you're going to pass away, there are so many planning aspects aside from dealing with a death that young people really need to be taken care of.
Well, let's expand a little bit then on the definitions, because we're saying estate plan, we're saying trust. I know wills is a big part of it. So can you break it down maybe by defining specifically what's the differences between these things?
Sure. So most people are familiar with the terms wills and trust. A trust is an actual document that you establish. It's a form of holding title to your assets, and it instructs how those assets will be managed upon your death. You do change title officially to your trust. Anything titled in your trust is managed by that. Anything that is not held in your trust is then considered your estate and would be managed by your will. To clarify that, certain bank accounts, if it's in your individual name, your car, you usually don't transfer title into the trust. So anything that is just held individually by you is then managed by your will in your estate. And in California, if all those assets that you have that aren't in a trust add up to over $150,000, then you're going to go to probate court. When you pass, you'll be forced to go into that, which is lengthy and expensive. And really the whole point of a trust is to avoid that.
And also to be able to control things after you're gone, right?
Yes. And a will can do that. You can absolutely give your assets away in the will, but it's going to be greatly reduced because of all the fees you have to pay. And it's just a distribution. You don't have as much control with a will as you would with a trust. You can maintain someone's inheritance in a trust until they reach a certain age. If there happens to be any substance abuse or capacity issues, you can create trusts that would provide for them without giving them the inheritance outright that would disqualify them from social benefits they may be receiving, or cause them harm to themselves if they have a substance abuse problem. We don't want someone inheriting hundreds of thousands of dollars, with free range to do whatever they want with that.
Yeah.
So is there a threshold for who should have a trust and who should just have a will? I mean, from a monetary standpoint, or is it for everyone?
In California, pretty much if you have a home, it's for everyone. But there are a lot of people that rent or have mobile homes, and their assets don't add up to more than $150,000. From a financial aspect, if you're doing a very simple distribution outright equally to XYZ, then no, you wouldn't need a trust. But if you have less than $150,000 and you want to have more control over the distributions, or have people, like I said, that have special needs and you want to make sure you don't disqualify them from certain benefits, you would definitely need to set up a trust.
Yeah, and I guess we always talk about the financial aspects of it, but it's really important to think about the caretaking aspects of it too,
right.
Which is if we have kids, we want the best of all to happen to them, and whatever that means to each individual one of us. Our brother, our sister, our spouse may not be able to mind read us from the grave.
Absolutely.
And say, let's figure out what it is you want while you're still here.
Absolutely. And it can cause a lot of discord when you don't have that in writing. Financially, yes. And especially with medical wishes, when you don't have those aspects written down, family feels one way. No, they would want this. No, they would want that. It creates a lot of stress and emotional discord on an already very trying and overwhelming time. So I tell my clients that, yes, you're doing this so your wishes are followed and everything happens according to what you want, but you're also doing this to relieve a lot of stress and anxiety from your family members.
Absolutely.
Well, I remember, in learning a little bit more about trust, very specifically, I think it was an attorney that told us that it's very difficult for anyone to read intent. And so
Right.
It's extremely important that you actually are very specific when it comes to developing the trust. And the example I think that he gave was you can't just say, I'd like X amount of dollars or a percentage to go to Columbia University. Did you have to be specific? Because I think in the United States, there's like multiple Columbia universities.
Right.
Is it the one in New York? Is it, do you have to say
Absolutely.
Columbia University? Even put the address or even the department, like the Department of Communications at, like the more specific you are, then it's easier for the executor to carry out those instructions.
Absolutely. And you brought up an amount or a percentage, and just to touch on that, we don't like actual amounts. We like to stick to percentages. I tell my clients, you never know what the actual amount is going to be in your trust. And if you gave a gift of $50,000 and that's all you have in your estate, and you thought that was, 1% of your estate, no one else is going to inherit anything, because specific gifts do get paid out first.
Right.
And that's going to wipe everything out. So we stick to percentages. And then being specific on where it goes is twofold. One, you want to get the right institution, but two, if that institution, charity, person is no longer alive or in existence, we need to know where it would go after that. Do you want it to be paid out to a similar charity or place? Or do you want it to be paid out to that beneficiary's children? Do you want it just to go back into the trust and be distributed to the residue, or to someone completely different? So we go through all those steps in every possible scenario, because we like to have all our bases covered. You never know what's going to happen. And we don't want to be standing here trying to figure out, well, what would they have wanted had they known this place wasn't going to be around?
That's so interesting. And we were just having this conversation at a church event the other day, because they're trying to raise money for a new church or improvements on the church. And I said to some people that are more in charge of that area, I just said, the thing is that what we don't do enough of is just say, I want 10% or 5% or whatever that number is to go to this, charity of our choice, because I think that is so easy for us to do.
Right.
But at this point in our lives, we think, no, we need to have enough money for our family first. And then once they're taken care of, whatever else could go there. But then in the end, you could die prior to that happening, and you didn't contribute anything, and
right.
and you always wanted to contribute it. So, I think even just for beneficiary instructions, 5%, 10%, that's so easy to do.
It really is. And you're inheriting, a good amount of money. So taking, a small percentage off the top, if it's something you're passionate about and you really believe, most of my clients do end up giving a portion to charity, and then the rest, they say whatever's remaining, split equally. And by doing a percentage, it grows and shrinks with your estate. So no one feels that, well, had he known that he would have spent all his money and now 75% of the estate is going to this charity, they would not have wanted this. Now you have, this contest of the trust and major issues arising. We keep it at a percentage, then it keeps everyone happy, because it grows and shrinks with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
Well, I'm reminded, a lot of these documents, like the trust, is really not so much for the people dying, it's for the people that are still living.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's really, they follow through those instructions.
Right. And it makes it more spelled out in black and white for everyone. And like I said, makes it much, much simpler on everyone involved.
Yeah. And coming from the position of having people close to me in my life pass away, I think what we all look for as the surviving kids or what have you, or family members and friends, is just that idea of executing their wishes and letting their legacy continue when they're gone.
Right.
Because if they're gone, we still want memories. We still want what was their spirit to last on. And I think this is a really great way of doing it.
Absolutely.
Well, I remember when my parents went through the exercise of developing their trust, the comfort that it provided to me and my sisters, that they actually took the time to develop it. And it took one worry away, that whole, if something was to happen to my dad or my mom, we know what their wishes are. We know what to do. There's instructions. And it's a really emotional time.
It is. And I just had a client this morning come in and say, I had no idea my parents had this set up, and he was a trustee, and he was just so grateful. He said, this is so clean and easy, and I never imagined that it would be this simple to go through. And it's just a weight off his shoulders.
Okay, so we're we're getting close to Thanksgiving, my favorite time of the year.
Yes.
Love all the food, and the holidays in general. And so we're going to be with our family. And some of the things we want to think about is, I'm constantly aware, how are my family members doing with their cognitive abilities? Right. And starting to engage in questions that have to do not just with the money, but what happens with their health.
Absolutely. And I think the most important documents in an estate plan are the healthcare directives and the durable power of attorney for finances, because those are the documents that take care of you while you're still alive. Mm-hmm. The trust and the will, they're very important to make sure your assets go where you want them to be, but not to sound blunt about it, but you're dead and it's going to happen how it's going to happen. The other documents, you're still alive and you want to make sure you're taking care of the way you want to be taken care of, and that your finances are properly managed for your benefit, and you don't have someone accessing your funds when you don't know the difference and you can't tell that someone is not being on the up and up with your finances.
Right. So are there any suggestions you have for maybe the family members? We have a lot of adult children who are looking after aging parents and whatnot.
Right. We have one of the biggest aging communities ever right now. And I'm seeing more conservatorships this year. And even the court system is so overloaded with conservatorships because the aging community is losing capacity and they don't have these very, very important documents in place. So if you have a healthcare directive and a durable power of finance, your agent can pay your bills, manage your finances, sell your house should that be needed for your care to get the money out of it, or make your medical decisions because you don't have the capacity to do that. These documents in place will allow them to do that. If you have not created these documents, someone still needs to be able to have the authority to access your finances, to pay your bills, to sell your house if you need those assets to pay medical expenses, to make the medical decisions for you on your behalf, and to know exactly what it is that you would want to happen in certain situations. If you don't have those documents, they will need to go through the conservatorship process in court. It is a lengthy process. It is quite expensive and it's pretty invasive. They will send an interviewer out, a court investigator, to interview you, the person that you are trying to conserve, family members. They will have you write down every single penny that you spend for their benefit. You have to supply first year accounting, and then every 2 years after that, where everything goes. It's under court supervision, and it's not the way to go. Nobody wants it, and it can get really hairy really fast.
Wow. So if we want things to happen the right way when we're alive, we need that healthcare directive.
Absolutely.
And the durable power of attorney for finances. And one thing that brings up in our world is, this whole idea that people tend to start losing capacity with financial things first.
Yes. You'll see multiple checks paid to the same place. Maybe an overpayment on something that is questionable, that shouldn't have cost $100, should have been $20, but they're paying that. Monetary gifts to people that normally that person would not do, missed bills, missed payments on the mortgage, on the electricity bill, those kinds of things that it's just very easy to forget normally that when someone starts, their cognitive ability starts to decline, it starts to really ramp up in those areas that you can see it.
Mm-hmm. And we talked about this in our previous podcast, especially some of the technology. This is where AI can really help out in finding those patterns, for
Absolutely.
Inappropriate transactions and things that fall outside the norm.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's exciting, that you can use technology to protect, the family, and ensuring, that, as Kim pointed out, if that's one of the first warning signs, or let's say a red flag of activity, that's why it's so important to have these directives so that someone can actually take charge.
Absolutely. And typically we do one of two things. You can either make the directive immediately effective or effective upon incapacity. I always tell my clients, if you've been diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia, if you find yourself being forgetful and things are overwhelming, go ahead and make it effective immediately. Cut through the red tape of getting the doctor's notes of incapacitation. If they feel comfortable having their agent have that authority immediately. The other way we do it is require a doctor's letter of incapacity before the agent can take control, which is usually what we do for our younger clients, and someone that just wants to have the paperwork in order and there's really no pending situation.
Right. And a good thing to, again, reiterate is this whole idea that it takes a while. Like you could have early onset of dementia or Alzheimer's and still be legally have some capacity.
Absolutely.
And so this is where early intervention and recognizing those warning signs so early, if you can just give them medication that can delay the process so they can get everything in order.
And so what we do with that, we do have actually a third option, which I find is probably what most people go with. We do the durable power of attorney and we leave it, that it becomes effective upon incapacity. But I also supply them with a blank form that if they've been diagnosed and they still have their cognitive ability, they're not ready to give up that much power. It's a form that they can fill out once they realize it's getting a little further down the line. And they themselves, by signing it, change that document to become effective immediately. It is notarized. They do have to go through that process, but they can still cut through the red tape, not have to get the doctor's letter of incapacitation. But it's pretty much kind of putting that on hold until it's absolutely necessary, but still having that backup document ready to go if that paper never gets signed.
Yeah, I could see that being really valuable.
Right.
So Barbara, we're talking about things and conversations that can be extremely challenging, especially as it relates to, facing your mortality or perhaps your the lack of capacity.
Right.
How do you navigate through that with clients?
It is difficult and it does get overwhelming. Some clients handle it really well, answer all my questions, and we're fine. But the majority, I do keep a box of tissues on my desk. It does get a little heavy. Part of my job does become acting like a counselor, not only bringing up their mortality and the decisions they would want to make in their healthcare directive, and after we do go through the whole process of burial versus cremation and what they want to happen at that point too after they die, but it brings up their personal experiences with a family member that's passed away. So we're not just dealing with them. I hear a lot of stories of, this was great when this person passed away, everything was in order, or this was horrible and we had to deal with this. So it does tend to get a little heavy, and we kind of walk our way through, and sometimes clients want to take home a questionnaire. And then they'll fill it out and answer it at their own pace. But I do find they do want to kind of talk about it, and they don't want to bring it home with them. They want to leave it there. So we do get through it. It is tough for a lot of people, but I think just letting them know that we're doing this so that everything goes according to what you want. It doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow, and I know it's hard to talk about, but this way the anxiety and emotions you're feeling now are yours, and you're not passing them on to your loved ones to deal with if you didn't have this document.
Yeah. I wrote down a question from this senior webinar that I was taking, and I thought it was so well worded, because one of the things that I always say is, when we're looking at the financial planning side of things, what happened, what would happen if you weren't to wake up tomorrow?
Right. And most people don't want to think about that. And when they do, they say, and they kind of go down a little bit of a rabbit hole for a while. And we say, no, we're not trying to get morbid. We're trying to say, if you didn't wake up tomorrow, you don't have these documents, who's going to make your decisions? Have you discussed even with your spouse, your children, your parents, if you want cremation or burial, if you want to donate your organs, if you want to remain on life support, if you're in a persistent vegetative state? There are so many questions that we walk through that people don't even broach with their loved ones.
Yeah. So I like that question just because you don't have to use death in it.
Right.
And then this was the question that I liked for thinking about, what happens to you if you become incapacitated or one of these things. And it was, what if you need care beyond what you might anticipate happening?
Absolutely. And that's why we have both the financial power of attorney and the medical directive. What would you want to do medically? What are your decisions? And like you said, things that they can't even imagine happening.
Right.
And then if you can't imagine it, you probably haven't financially planned for it, which is why we would have that power of attorney, that if we do need to sell your house, because that is most people's main asset. And that can go a long way to providing care for you that you didn't maybe foresee.
And if you need a catalyst, you can be like Kim and watch a lot of Grey's Anatomy to see situations where
Oh my goodness.
trust or something like that would have been, or a healthcare directive would have been valuable.
I know I always come up with stories there, but I mean, we are living in a time where we are having more and more stories in our own personal lives that I don't think it's a situation, we're at conferences and every one of us advisors have run into a situation with a client experience where somebody starts experiencing less capacity and whatnot. This is real.
Yeah, absolutely. And with Alzheimer's, dementia, anything like that, you can live a very, very long time, gradually needing more and more care. And as long as you have these documents in place, typically the medical directive says, keep me at home as long as possible. Everyone wants to be in the comfort of their own home. But if needed, you can say, hey, I've toured this place. I've looked at this place. If you need to put me somewhere with 24-hour care and surveillance and a memory unit, this is where I would prefer. And you can list all of that. We do palliative care. If you would want to go on palliative care, which is giving morphine or other drugs that may hasten your death, but if you're terminal and you don't you want to sit there in pain, we go through that process as well. And like you said, things people just really don't think about and really plan for.
Yeah. And, and this is from firsthand experience too, with the palliative care. It's like, I think people are waiting so last minute. And then when they have that treatment, it's like, oh my gosh, why did I keep my loved one in pain for so long? Should have done it sooner.
And it's a hard decision for people to make for a loved one. And that's why it's so important. Get it in black and white. They don't even have to think about it. They don't have to wrestle with their emotions. This is what they wanted. This is what we're doing.
And it sounds like it's not necessarily something that you'd sit down and like knock out in one afternoon. It's a process, right? The questionnaire, that going through, having those conversations kind of leading up to the documentation.
It depends. There are quite a few clients that come in. They know exactly what they want. We sit down for about an hour. I gather information. We sit and we talk just like this. What is it your goals are? What's your ideal situation? And we go through it all. And then we meet again to review it, make sure they didn't change. And I give about 2 weeks between that for me to draft, for any answer or question or answers to go back and forth via email or phone call. And then there are some clients that we have to meet a few more times because they really don't know. A lot of people get really hung up on organ donation. They're very torn emotionally. Cremation versus burial. I have a lot of spouses that disagree on that.
I think you're looking at two that fall in that camp right now.
And so they want to do the same thing, but neither of them is willing to make that jump. So they need time to think about it. Typically, they end up doing their own thing, and the urn is buried next to the body.
It's a happy solution.
I think I heard that suggestion recently.
And so it varies on the individual. Sometimes people, like I said, can be very distanced from it and say, this is what I want. I'm not getting emotionally involved because it's not happening right now. And some people, just bringing it up, and the tears start and it's very overwhelming. And we do have to walk through it a couple more times before we can really finalize their plan.
And that's something I really want to build on because I think it's really important. One of the main reasons why we wanted to do this financial professional series and talking to people like yourself and Janine, and we also talked to Jenny and also Lisa, was this whole idea of working with a professional. This is something that you do, that you talk to these people and you have the experience of having these conversations to really ensure that that documentation is reflecting their wishes.
Absolutely.
And what you said, which was really important, is there's almost this not unemotional. It's not to say you're not empathetic about the situation, but that you can actually see it with a real clear-cut, black and white, this is what we need to do.
Absolutely.
And I think that there's something to be said about the experience. And every time you do one of these, I think people sometimes are funny when it comes to money. I always say that. But the reason why is it may be very clear what their wishes are, but very hard for somebody, a family member, to understand why.
Absolutely. One of the worst things I ever witnessed, and it was right when I was first starting in the profession, and it was not a client of mine. It was a client of an attorney in my firm at the time. And the person that passed away had filed a healthcare directive. In the healthcare directive, it said that he wanted to be cremated. Well, while he was still alive and nearing the end, and he knew that he was going to pass very soon, he expressed to his family members that the fire started to really scare him. The thought of being cremated was terrifying, and he wanted to be buried. So the daughter followed the wishes and buried her father, and they had the services. It was a stepmother at the time. She got a hold of the document. It became a court trial. She wanted to cremate him, saying that this were his wishes in his healthcare directive. He just had a lapse of judgment. And it was a whole case in court, and they actually won. The stepmother won. They dug up the body and had it cremated.
Wow.
So it's still, just two separate people seeing two separate things, both wanting to do right by their loved one, but having two ideas on what that exactly was. So even if it is down on paper and you change your mind, or, as much as you can, write it down, record it. There's laws that do uphold a vocal request like that. But I guess they just didn't have the evidence to prove that it was valid.
Wow. That is an extreme case.
Yes.
That's, yeah. So, and I'm sure you probably see in situations, like the whys played out, or, have you considered what this may make your kids feel like, or one thing or another, because you could probably see the potential pitfalls down the road with some choices that we decide.
Absolutely. And a lot of times clients, before they meet with me, they say, is there a questionnaire we can fill out so we have all the answers? If they really want one, I'll provide them, because they do like to be a little prepared, and that's fine. But I don't work off of a questionnaire. I do a conversation, because you never know where it's going to lead. I've uncovered major issues before with an estate plan and their family that by doing a questionnaire, we never would have found out if I just relied upon that. So just because having the experience and knowing, okay, I've seen a similar situation like this, and these are the issues. And the client goes, oh, yeah, I didn't even think about that. That is happening.
That's huge.
And so it opens this whole other area that we need to plan for now, because they just had no idea. They have a special needs child that is on social benefits that they didn't realize they couldn't just leave the inheritance to, because once they inherit, they lose their benefits, and they're going to just drain through. What they really need to do is set up a special needs trust. And so we walk down that path and kind of find out what the best option is for them in that situation.
Yeah, that's huge. It's funny because it goes back to this conversation we have multiple times, which is you're not just paying me for the service that I provide. You're paying for the years of experience that it has taken me to give you the advice that I'm going to give you.
Absolutely. And people say, I do get the question, well, why wouldn't I just go use LegalZoom for a third of the price, or go do this? And I said, you can. I always tell them, if it's a very straightforward, no issues, great. Go use LegalZoom. I'll cross my fingers that it all works out. But usually even someone that thinks their estate plan is very straightforward and simple, things pop up that they don't think about. And their kids are in my office once they pass, trying to fix the LegalZoom trust or those kinds of, documents, do it yourself. And I don't want to say they're horrible. Sometimes they work in certain situations and it's better than nothing. Absolutely. But it's not the best option, and it's not something I would recommend for most people.
Yeah, I get it.
No, it reminded me of that story where the guy sets up, he's a barber, and right next door, somebody else sets up a haircut place, and they say $5 haircuts. And he starts undercutting him on price, right? And so the barber's really upset because he's charging half of what he charges for a haircut. And so he puts up a big sign that says, "We fix $5 haircuts."
And that is exactly what it is. You get what you pay for.
Yeah.
So this has all been really valuable information. I hope people, if you're driving, I hope you weren't taking notes, but obviously take notes. And it's a really important subject, and it's a nice way for us to wrap up the Financial Professional Series. So if, Barbara, if people wanted to learn more about you, your firm, and how they can work with you, what would be their best resources?
Sure. You can visit my website at Pretlove Law, and that's spelled P as in Paul, RETLO, V as in Victor, law, LAW.com. Or you can call my office, 408-850-6402.
Well, we'll be sure to include a link to your firm on the show podcast notes, as we do with all the shows. And so it'd be easy for people to get a hold of you. But before we let you go, we've got 3 questions for you. These are always the fun questions we like to ask all our guests. So the first one is, if you were going to go on a vacation and money was not an impediment, so you can go anywhere you want, what would be your top vacation destination?
I would definitely go to Scotland.
Oh, really?
I just found out through Ancestry.com. I'm actually related to James Stewart, who was the stepbrother, or half-brother, of Mary Stewart. So that would be something really nice that I would love to do. And it is on my list of things to do in this lifetime.
That's good. Well, good luck. I can't wait to hear about that trip.
Thanks.
Second question, and this one's always fun, is if you currently have either a book or a show, let's say on Netflix or Hulu, that you're really binging that you love. Anything that gets you excited about these days?
Oh,
Kim's is Grey's Anatomy, so that's easy.
And I'm looking for another show because I'm on the 15th season.
Right. Oh, gosh. I watch so many shows. I'm just trying to think, which one do I really, really like?
Or recommend.
Well, if you're doing medical, I love The Resident.
The Resident.
Yeah.
There you go. Now you got your next one.
That one is really good. And then on Netflix.
What about Law?
Law, I don't find anything big right now. I watch SVU all the time. But I stay away from lawyer shows. I don't know.
It's too close.
I want to turn my brain off, and I find myself following down that path. No.
We think there's not enough financial advisor sitcoms or shows. I don't think there's any.
I know. Well, no, the one dude, the one dark one that stresses me out. The Ozarks.
Oh, yes. That is a stressful. Yeah, that's not a good one. That's not a good one.
That's a bad one.
It's a great show. Great. And I like Jason Bateman, but I'm not sure that's the best reflective light on financial advisors.
No, we just watched Living with Myself. That one was good. That's on Netflix with Paul Rudd.
I like that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I saw that one. Very creative, too.
Yes.
Very creative. Yes. You can't help but think, if you had someone who was just like you, like a twin, how would you react? Good one. And then the final question, is there an app that you couldn't live without?
Probably what is it? Noteworthy? Not Noteworthy. Notes. Just my Microsoft Notes. I have my iPad with my pen, and I have everything from my kids' schedule to my schedule, my husband's schedule, my client intakes for work, everything, because I don't like keeping track of a million yellow pieces of paper with all my notes on them.
Me too.
So it's nice all in one place. I don't have to say, where the heck did I just put that?
You know exactly where it is.
Exactly.
So Notes. It's part of Outlook. Is it part of the Office 365 suite?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to have to try that out.
Yeah. And then I have the pencil with the new iPad. So I just write right on the screen.
Yeah, I saw that. I like that.
I love it.
Does it change it from pencil to type or not? Okay.
Yeah, I have the Bluetooth typewriter on it. So I usually type in the heading and then I'll take all my notes.
Yeah.
And you can do highlighter, pen, pencil.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
Yeah, I might look into that because I've noticed that my writing is getting more chicken scratchy.
And I love to write because I think you do remember things better.
Yeah.
Especially taking notes.
Yeah.
And things.
You can put little Post-its, digital Post-its on there. It's really nice. You can do a lot with it.
And I'm a big Microsoft user and I didn't know about that. I've been using Google Keep.
Okay.
See, I'm a quilt full of apps, and I just need to get better at using one ecosphere.
And that's what I do. I use Microsoft OneDrive, so I access all my documents from anywhere.
Yeah.
But Kim, you are a tech girl, so you got to take,
Yeah, I know.
try things out.
I know.
Right?
My tech is stressing me out these days.
Well, we want to really thank you, Barbara, for coming
thank you
in
for having me.
recording the podcast and sharing all your insights and information on very important conversation, and to wrap up the Financial Professional series with us. So thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful.
And we remind you, Kim, what do we always say?
What will you do
When your money works for you. Ah, I like it, like a chorus. All right, we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you have questions, comments, or suggestions for future shows, please send an email to victor@techgirlfinancial.com or join the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag AskTGF. We also encourage you to follow us on the Tech Girl Financial page on Facebook and connect with us on LinkedIn.
Securities offered through registered representatives of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member FINRA, SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Tech Girl Financial and Cambridge Investment Research, Inc. are not affiliated companies. Cambridge does not offer legal advice.